Good morning and welcome to the Smarter Work with Generative AI, or SWAI, seminar. My name is Pinja Hokkanen and I will be your host this morning. So SWAI, or Smarter Work with Generative AI, is a joint research project between Aalto and multiple international companies. And our research team, as you can see here, is led by Jukka and Henry. And then we have our postdoctoral researcher, Andre, who's been instrumental in driving this event forward. And then me and Heli have been also part of doing the research. Aalto Executive Education has been making it possible, and Reetta here is going to introduce us to Aalto EE.
My name is Reetta Ruusunen and I warmly welcome you on behalf of Aalto EE to this exciting event. World Economic Forum published an interesting Future of Jobs report 20 days ago. How many of you have perhaps had a chance to look at it yet? A few. According to the report, 86% of employers predict that their businesses will be transformed as a result of AI and digital technologies. 86%, that's quite a lot. 39% of skills will be disrupted during the next 5 years. That's also quite a high number. We here at Aalto EE are here to help individuals and organizations navigate through these disruptive times. We are your partner for life-wide learning, continuous life-wide learning. We base our work on Aalto University's unique combination of academic research and knowledge on business design and technology. We blend that with practical insights and experiences and understanding on how organizations and skills are changing and need to change. We provide this to you in a format of 140 open enrollment programs spanning from bite-sized learning modules all the way to MBA journeys. We also tailor and custom learning solutions for organizations. We have a very strong international footprint. For example, our Korean Executive MBA program celebrates its 30-year anniversary this year. We're happy to tell you more about this. You can go to our website, aaltoee.fi, to learn more. Thank you.
All right, good morning, everyone. It's such a pleasure to be here. I'm so happy that there are so many of you here, so welcome all, also on behalf of myself. So my role here is to tell you a little bit something about what the research currently says about AI, how it's being adopted, and what are its potential implications for work, for organizations, and for society more generally. So there's a bunch of names there which I won't read, but I'm just saying that there's a group of people behind this presentation. I want to give a special shout out to our excellent master's thesis students who have been doing work in the project. So we have a group of students who have been working with our partnering organizations, helping them explore topics related to generative AI. So the talk really is talking about emerging research. So this is a relatively new area of research. So a lot of the work that I'm going to talk about, both the work that we have been doing and as well as the work that's being done in the world, is really kind of a ongoing research. So I think there are a lot of open questions still, but there's already some kind of interesting indications of what the research tells us. So I will be telling what research we have been doing in the SWAI research project. I'll tell a little bit about what our students have been doing research at Aalto University, and then I'll also draw on research from the global research community, what people in different research institutions have been looking at in the context of, or in relation to generative AI and what people have been finding out. But because this is kind of like the first presentation, so I want to give some maybe statistics about this phenomenon to set the context a little bit for the discussion that is going to follow. So everyone knows that like it's a hugely hyped phenomenon. Like the attendance here maybe tells us something about it. And of course, the question is like, is there any real traction? So what is the actual adoption of this technology? And my answer is that AI has already made the breakthrough to business. So depending on that, you can pick the number that you like. These are numbers that represent how much people are using generative AI in their work. So if you ask these people who are actually developing the tools, so then they are saying that it's 75%. If you ask sort of more neutral parties, then the number is something smaller. So if you think that 24% of US workers, so this is like a representative sample of US workers, if you think 24% is a small number of users, that's a faster adoption rate than what was the adoption rate for the internet and PCs. So we're talking about a technology that's being adopted faster than, I don't know, any technology that I can think of in recent memory. So it's really has broken through, and in some ways I would say that there's no putting genie back into the bottle with regard to how this is going to change. So now the interesting question, of course, is that how will this kind of transform businesses and how will this transform society over time? But I think it's pretty clear that we will see kind of major changes. The other side of the coin is, okay, so everyone is using generative AI. Maybe we can get a show of how many have used some Gen AI tool over the past week? Right? So everyone, I don't know if there was someone who didn't raise their hand, but maybe they felt bad about that. Anyway, so that's one side of the equation. The other side of the equation is most of this adoption so far is at the individual level. So individual workers have adopted AI tools as part of their daily work. Organizations mostly have not. So this is from the Microsoft and LinkedIn survey. I think it's pretty informative that, yes, a lot of people are using AI, but most people are using AI tools that they bring themselves to the workplace. So they have their own ChatGPT licenses or whatever AI tool it is that they're using, and the organization isn't really driving the change. So I would say that most of the organizations of November 2022, when ChatGPT was launched, are pretty much the same organizations as we see today. So AI hasn't really transformed any of the organizations so far, but maybe some of them, but most of the organizations are exactly that were before. So I think we're really at the beginning of this change. So if you look at, this is some data on the right-hand side of the slide. This is some data that I pulled from LinkedIn, looking at what are some open positions in Finland, and I tried out different keywords or search terms. So there are 100 positions open with the search term generative AI. So there are more positions open, almost 2.5 times more for the search term search engine optimization. And search engine optimization is like one of the application domains where people thought that, hey, Gen AI is going to replace all of these people. So this is just telling us that we're just in the beginning of this sort of transformation journey. And I think this is actually a really, really good time for this event and for us to kind of come together and reflect a little bit on what is actually happening in this domain. So I'll talk about 3 things in my presentation with regard to research. I'll talk about perceptions of generative AI. This is research that we have been doing now. We've talked to people who are in one way or the other involved in the adoption of generative AI in their organizations. So we've so far interviewed around 50 people. We're still in the process of collecting this data. I'll talk a little bit about framing generative AI. What I mean by this is how people are sort of interpreting the meaning of this technology and the potential that this technology brings. I'll talk just a little bit about implementation, and here I will be drawing on the awesome student research that's being done in Aalto University. And finally, I'll talk about what can we expect this technology to change in work and in organization. And here I will draw on research that have been done globally. So I'll talk a little bit about what we call augmentation effects of AI. This means what are the effects when you have a human worker and you give them an AI tool? How does it change their productivity? How does it change the work quality? How does it change their experience of work, and so on and so forth. So this will be kind of like the map into the presentation. So first about the perceptions. So this is kind of what we've kind of figured out so far. So we have, when we talk to people who are involved in the adoption of generative AI in their organizations, so we have asked them about what do they think about the application potential of this technology, how should it be deployed, and so on and so forth. We kind of find these different ways of different understandings of what this technology is all about. So we have kind of analyzed the data in terms of these 5 dimensions, and I'll just give you a quick sort of overview of how people are talking about this technology. I'm not really saying that one way of talking about or thinking about the technology is correct, but I would consider, like, you can maybe, while I'm explaining these concepts, you can maybe think about where am I in this map, and could I challenge myself to think about this in a different kind of way. So regarding the nature of technology, a lot of people, I don't have quantitative evidence, but my subjective sense is most of the people would think about generative AI as a productivity enhancer. So it allows us to do the stuff that we're already doing, but faster, maybe with less resources and with more output. So that's one way to think about it. So we call it the productivity enhancer. The alternative way of thinking about it is that actually generative AI, the most interesting part of it is how it enables us to recreate new work practices, maybe even reinvent business models. Of course, no one really knows what the new ways of working will be or what the new business models will be. But this is kind of like a distinction that some people are more looking into how will it enable new ways of working and perhaps even new business model. One interesting observation regarding this is that, based on our interview evidence at least, it's not really that certain types of organizations would see this as a generative technology versus a productivity enhancer. It's more like a variation between individuals. So in the same organization, we might have people who have very different views on the potential of this technology. The other thing that I would actually recommend everyone to kind of reflect on their own about this is that what is actually the logic by which you make investments into generative AI experiments and technologies. So a lot of people think about this in terms of like a conventional investment decision. So we think about what can we, if we make these investments, which we create these applications for generative AI, how much will we save time? How much will we will become more efficient, so on and so forth? And does that justify the investment? So that's one way of thinking about it. But other people are thinking about this more in terms of open-ended learning. So this is perhaps not the time to think about the investments in terms of will this particular proof of concept, will this particular experiment pay off in a financial sense? Or is it something that we do the experiments now so that the organization gets a better understanding of the technology, and maybe then the actual positive, like ROI positive investments will be made over time? I understand that, it's easy for me to say that, hey, think about this in terms of open-ended learning because I'm not in charge of the money and I don't have a P&L responsibility, but I would encourage you to kind of think about the possibility of thinking in those terms. Then in terms of what is actually the AI, how does it get deployed in organizations? So some people are thinking about this in terms of like off-the-shelf tools. So it is the ChatGPT, it is the Microsoft Copilot, it is maybe the AI features of some enterprise software. So that's, again, one way of thinking about it. Other people are thinking about it more in terms of what kind of customized software can we create in the organization, where the generative AI is really just one building block in the larger kind of IT infrastructure system. So again, of course, these off-the-shelf tools are relevant for all kinds of organizations, but if that is the only way in which you're thinking about it, just bear in mind that there are people who are thinking about more in terms of, doing more tailored solutions for the organization. Then in terms of adoption, organizations and people who talk about AI mostly in terms of these off-the-shelf tools, they also see that, okay, adopting AI is really just making decisions about who gets the licenses, and maybe the individuals then make a decision of, do I want to use this tool or do I not want to use this tool? Most of the governance issues then relate to what are the policies that we give to humans. So, okay, you shouldn't use AI for this, you can use for AI for that, you can put this kind of data there, you cannot put that kind of data there, those types of things. Whereas when you are thinking about AI more in terms of these tailored software solutions, the mode of adoption is more about you do local experiments, so people in teams might do proofs of concept and things like this, but the actual sort of adaptation or scaling then happens in a more centralized fashion. And here, of course, like the governance issues might relate less so to policies for humans and more about how we make sure that the technology works in the reliable fashion that we want it to. So these are just kind of alternative ways to think about it. I have a sort of personal bias that I think we should think more in terms of the right-hand side of the slide, but that's my bias. So I'm not saying that you should, go all in and not care about the financial returns. That's not what I'm saying, but I encourage you to entertain kind of alternative interpretations, depending on where you kind of fall here on the map. All right, so that's the perception part. Then in terms of the implementation, I highlight a couple of things from our awesome student research. So this is a list of master's theses that you can find publicly downloadable PDF files online. And they are actually a pretty good way to get a sense of some of the implementation challenges. So I would just, I'm not going to read through all of these. A lot of these student research projects are such that they involve building some kind of a proof of concept for the organization. So generative AI in application domain X. There's usually a lot of expert interviews that have been done to sort of support that. But what I would really recommend you to do is that you'll get the slides later, but just bookmark that page and keep a tab on what master's theses are coming up there, because those are usually pretty good descriptions of what are the actual problems in trying to implement generative AI in a particular context. So I really just recommend you to kind of take a look at that. So a couple of things that emerges from this students' research that I'd like to highlight. First of all, this is maybe pretty obvious. There's enormous potential. So what you get is that there's a couple of theses, for example, there, where the idea is that the student interviews experts and then they identify a bunch of use cases, and then there's like dozens of use cases. So in case you feel like maybe in my organization there isn't really a good use case for generative AI, it's probably because you haven't looked hard enough. But I want to draw your attention to the couple of sort of bottlenecks in the implementation that seems to be sort of popping up in these theses. One is AI output quality. So there are all these fantastic demonstrations of AI capabilities, but what a lot of these theses are finding out is that actually, the AI output quality, oftentimes it's kind of like okay, but it's not great so that it would really allow us to put the AI into production use. Now that's something to consider, but also something to consider is that this will improve even if you don't do anything. So the AI models will get better over time. So to some extent, you don't have to worry about it so much, even if the output quality is not great right out of the gate. The other thing that seems to be popping up is this data availability and quality is really where, what's a big sort of bottleneck for a lot of the applications. So you don't have just the right data, or you don't have enough of it, or it's poor quality, because a lot of the generative AI potential relies in taking the AI models and plugging it with your organizational data. But if the quality of your data is not there, then you're not really getting the most of the benefit. And this data availability and quality, the AI firms won't solve this for you. So this is something that you have to yourself think about. Are we collecting the right data? What is our structures for maintaining that, governing that, and things like that? So I would really kind of recommend you just to think about your sort of data management plans and strategies. All right, and then finally, I want to talk just a couple of words about these augmentation effects. So this is where we are drawing from international research. So this is a literature review-based study that we are doing. So we have been trying to identify empirical studies of people investigating how does the incorporation of AI tools into work impact productivity and other kinds of outcomes. So this is just a funnel describing our sort of literature search. Most of these studies have been done in the context of software development, maybe unsurprisingly. But there's a bunch of other interesting application areas as well. So I have here a couple of highlights from this research that I'd like to share with you. This is my final point I want to make. something that we can kind of learn from this research, at least so far. And some of these, I think, will have pretty big sort of long-term implications. So I'd like you to keep that in mind. So first of all, productivity and output quality increase. So this is like a consistent across the board of these studies. What's less clear, so there are studies kind of pulling in different directions, like whether people working with AI tools are more or less creative, whether they are able to produce more or less novel content, so that's unclear. It's also unclear whether it's the experts or the novices that get the most benefit out of this technology. So that's something where I don't think there's a clear answer. What is clear is that productivity increases. But then there are also other, maybe not so obvious effects. For example, accelerated learning. So there are a couple of ways in which this can happen. So first of all, the organization can embed some of its knowledge into textual data. So let's say we have successful sales agents and we transcribe those calls and we use that data then to inform our AI model, which will then help other salespeople perform better. So it can be a mechanism for sharing best practices. Another thing where kind of AI helps with learning is that it lowers the threshold of starting to learn something new. This is something that I have personally experienced, is that, it's much easier to start learning new stuff because you can be stupid and ask the AI things instead of having to, appear stupid and go talk to a colleague. So you learn much faster. Greater autonomy. So there's a bunch of studies kind of showing this. This is, I think, really, really interesting. But the kind of bottom line sort of finding here is that people are getting more work done without talking to other people because you can chat with the AI. And this, I think, is really interesting from an organizational standpoint. So if over time we're able to get more work done without talking to our colleagues, in the short term, that's awesome. So we get more work done. We don't have to spend time in stupid meetings. But of course, the question is, what is this going to do to the organization over time? So really something to consider. And then finally, I remember some AI people are, saying that, yeah, AI is awesome. It makes people can focus on the interesting stuff. AI gets to do all the boring stuff, so everyone is happy. The research is kind of very mixed on this. So there are people who are super happy and excited about using AI tools. And then there are people who are very worried about the future. From an organizational standpoint, I think it's important to keep this in mind. So when you start adopting AI in your own organization, some people, maybe the most vocal people, will be very sort of excited and they will voice their excitement with you. And then there will be a lot of people who will be worried and who will be, not liking the changes that you are creating with the AI. So just something for you to consider. So I'm hoping this, and I would say that the learning thing, for example, is something. Yes, it helps us learn, but the longer term implications of this can be pretty profound. So if everyone starts to learn at a faster pace, I don't really know what the implication of that is, but I think it's something for us to consider that something, it might change how organizations work, it might change the dynamics of industries and the future of professions. I'll just end there, and I hope this gives at least some basis for the subsequent discussions. And I suppose we can now get a few questions also from the audience. But thank you so much for your attention, and thank you so much for coming here today.
Thank you. Thank you, Jukka, for sharing those interesting insights. I have a few questions here. So first question is, Gen AI tailored solutions. Combining LLM models with models on private datasets is the winning combination. What do you think?
Well, I don't think I think that's a winning combination in many contexts, but I don't really have I wouldn't say that that's for everyone or that's in all of the cases. But yes, I think, well, as a strategy person, I would say that it's very hard to create a competitive edge if you are starting to use the same tools that everyone else is using. Maybe it's the table stakes that you need to have those tools because everyone else is using them. But I think if you want to have the competitive edge, maybe it's your unique data sets combined with AI that will give you the edge.
Isn't so that often fixing related issues can be done super efficiently with GenAI? So fixing the data-related issues, like collecting data with bots or fixing bad quality data sets with LLMs.
Yeah, so I think actually like LLMs probably will help like cleaning data sets. So there's one example that's kind of publicly available about Walmart that did this sort of LLM cleaning of their product catalog. So it was, I can't remember like what they said, like how much of their time they were able to save, but going through their product catalog and kind of making sure the data is accurate and using LLMs for that. So certainly that will help, but it won't happen automatically. So kind of there's still this kind of organization-specific
yes,
work
you need
there.
to leverage the AI to actually do the data cleaning.
Yeah.
Autonomous AI agents. So what about those as their objective is not to augment humans, but do the actual work? In other words, replace humans. So maybe your opinions on this autonomous agents, AI agents.
Yeah, so in this talk, I focused on what we can sort of say empirically so far, or what has been kind of actually been done. And a lot of the AI agent stuff is like, so far science fiction, maybe a near-term science fiction, so I can't really speak to that. I don't know, like my sense is that I want to say that that's something that is kind of like maybe the not most interesting thing for most organizations in the short term, but that's my sort of a take. Depending on how you want to define the autonomy of the agent. But
well, in this case, it's there's an example for here. So service as software, where also the pricing model is different compared. Actually, I'm not sure if that was the example, but replacing humans is maybe the context here.
Well, I could certainly see that in certain cases where the customer is willing to accept that the AI might not kind of have this same level of, like if a human service representative makes an error, then they have a different sort of maybe ability to recover the situation. The AI solution might totally fail. But I think that's kind of similar as with any kind of digital solution to customer service, is that it's super efficient, but then in certain cases it doesn't really work. But I could certainly see in certain kind of context. But there, you can find online like these Chevrolet example, and then some other example where these AI customer service representatives have really like not done a great job. So maybe these autonomous AI agents at the customer interface are pretty dangerous as a first application. So maybe something internal would be better if you want to start trying out the technology.
Yeah. How should one craft strategies for the future in this fast-paced moving environment, and how to prepare for the future with AI agents?
Well, maybe like as a strategy person, I would think about, I don't have a great overall solution, but like one thing to maybe keep in mind. Oftentimes we think about the like generative AI or whatever, we think about how can we use this technology. I think it's always good to think also about how will our customers use this technology, how will our competitors use this technology, how will our suppliers use this technology, so you get a better sense of what is actually going to be the surrounding change, even if you don't find the great use cases for your own organization. So that would be something I would maybe at least think about. I think oftentimes we start from the internal, what can we do more efficiently, but then we forget about the strategic thinking, which is what is actually happening to the environment as a result of technological change.
Yes. Then final question, coming to the individuals actually here, or the relationship between individuals. This isn't your specialty, but based on the results presented, AI adoption will change interpersonal relations and challenge well-being at the workplaces. How do you hope employers will take this into account? And do you have a take on this one?
Yeah, so I think there's like a real danger in many ways associated with generative AI, that it will make work faster, it will make work more lonely, and it will make work feel like more pressured. So in the short term, it looks like, oh, it just gets rid of all of the, the hard stuff or the sort of tedious stuff, and I can focus on the creative parts. But of course, like over time, it's not that employers are just going to, there's a competitive force which is going to then increase the level of demands for all workers. So I think that's like the danger. What's the solution to that danger? I'm not really sure. I'm hoping that organizations would then think about long term and how does it actually change? Do we have a working environment in the longer term where people actually can have high levels of well-being and meaningfulness and so on and so forth. So I don't really have an answer of how that will be achieved. I would just keep that in mind and maybe sort of recognize that it doesn't necessarily, it isn't necessarily awesome for everyone. So you have to kind of just keep that in mind.
Yeah, balancing the effects. Okay.
All right.
Yes, that's all we have time. But thank you very much, Jukka. Let's give a big applause for him.
Thank you.